Dr. Howard C. Estep will now deliver the 16th message in his Joshua Bible Study series. Our Bible teacher is starting the study session with Joshua chapter 19, verse 40.
If you'll open your Bibles to the book of Joshua chapter 19, beginning in verse 40 through chapter 21, verse 8, we have our lesson for this hour. We have a lesson outline. In chapter 19, as we continue this lesson, we have the inheritance of Dan. That's verses 40 through 48, as you will notice. And then we go the second part as we conclude this particular chapter. We have Joshua's inheritance. After all of the tribes were given land, then Joshua was given a certain part of land, and you get that in verses 49 through 51. Then we go into chapter 20, which is a short chapter. It has only 9 verses, and there we have the 6 cities of refuge. And this is verses 1 through 9, and this explains how people were safe. If they had murdered someone, etc., they could run into any one of these 6 cities of refuge, and there they were safe as long as they stayed in the city. There's been a lot of sermons preached by preachers likening the cities of refuge to the plan of salvation through Jesus Christ. And then we move to chapter 21, and we're just going to pick up a part of it here. We have the Levites' inheritance, or the request of the Levites, and that's in chapter 21, verses 1 through 8. So now we go to the inheritance of Dan, verses 40 through 48, and Mr. Alexander Scorby, who does such a magnificent job of reading the entire Bible, is going to read these few verses for us. The inheritance of Dan, verses 40 through 48.
And the 7th lot came out for the tribe of the children of Dan according to their families. And the coast of their inheritance was Zorah and Eshtaol and Ershemesh and Shealabin and Ajalon and Jethlah and Elon and Thimnathah and Ekron and Eltekeh and Gibbethon and Baalath and Jehud and Bene-Berak and Gathrimmon and Mejarkon and Rakkon with the border before Japho. And the coast of the children of Dan went out too little for them. The children of Dan went up to fight against Leshem and took it, and smote it with the edge of the sword, and possessed it, and dwelt therein, and called Leshem Dan, after the name of Dan their father. This is the inheritance of the tribe of the children of Dan, according to their families, these cities with their villages.
So there we have the boundaries for the tribe of Dan, or at least the inheritance for Dan and the cities and the villages. And if you look, as I said before we began our lesson, if you'll notice right up at the top of the map, you have Dan away up in the north end of the top of what is now the state of Israel. Very interesting indeed. Now we move to Joshua's inheritance. This is rather interesting, verses 49 through 51. But verse 49 says, when they had made an end of dividing the land for inheritance by their coasts, the children of Israel gave an inheritance to Joshua, the son of Nun, among them. So here we have Joshua, the great leader of the Israelites. And up to this time, he hasn't had anything given him. He's been doing all the work, doing all the planning. And so we find that there's an inheritance going to be given him, according to verse 49. Verse 50 says, according to the word of the Lord, they gave him the city which he asked, even Timnath-Serah in Mount Ephraim, and he built the city and dwelt therein. These are the inheritance which Eleazar, the priest, and Joshua, the son of Nun, and the heads of the fathers of the tribes of the children of Israel divided for inheritance by lot in Shiloh, before the Lord, at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. So they made an end of dividing the country. Now it's rather interesting here. Joshua, instead of choosing a city, he merely asked for a place to build the city. And you pick that up in verse 50. Joshua was not only the last in his own tribe, but the last in all of the tribes. And this is a perfect example of a man who was very unselfish. Because as the commander-in-chief or the head of all of the tribes of Israel, he could have picked out the best land in all of what we now call the state of Israel, and he could have earmarked that for himself. But he was the last to get any property and the last to receive the land when it was divided. And you'll notice here, it's rather interesting. In the latter part of verse 51, it says, and the heads of the fathers of the tribes of the children of Israel divided for an inheritance by lot in Shiloh before the Lord. All inheritance were made or inquired about and granted in public at the door of the tabernacle, because they had set up the tabernacle for worship services, and this was all done publicly, so that there was no arguing or dissension later on that this was done secretly. You put pressure on them, you lobbied, and you got this done, etc., etc. This is all done public, so everybody would know about it. And that's why it makes a statement here that this was done in Shiloh before the Lord at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. So they made an end of dividing the country. This is rather interesting, this last statement here in verse 51. So they made an end of dividing the country. So this is it. Now they have divided the land, what we now call the state of Israel. They put all the tribes, as we've studied in the last 4 lessons, they put all the tribes in the different areas, and those tribes are there. And of course, they were scattered about 600 BC, about 587 BC. They were scattered when Nebuchadnezzar came up, and he took the Israelites captive down to Babylon. And of course, they left their land. Left the land behind, left their houses, left their farms, left their groves, their fruits, their orchards, all of that. They left all that behind because they were taken captive down to Babylon. And then, of course, the alien came in, as the Bible calls the Arab in a number of places. The alien came in, the Arabs, and they took over the land. And then, of course, the different armies of the world have fought over that land. This is probably the most fought over land in all of the world because it's at the geographical center of the earth's land surface. So they fought all over this land. And so the Jews were off of that land from about 600 BC till about 1900, roughly 2,500 years, they're off the land. So now, since 1948, they've gone back. And now, in this dispensation of time, through the ingenuity of a progressive premier, man in charge of Israel, they are now going back to the land that was given to them by God through Joshua and through the high priest Eleazar. So that's basically Joshua's inheritance in verses 49 through 51. Now we go to chapter 20, which is rather interesting. And here we have the 6 cities of refuge. Verse 1 says, the Lord also spake unto Joshua, saying, and you notice this fellow Joshua is always thinking of the other fellow? You know, that's a good quality to have. If you can always think of the comfort of the other fellow, or the other fellow getting something that you don't have. This man Joshua always giving it to the other fellow, dividing the 12 tribes before he got anything. Now he's thinking of the other fellow right now in chapter 20 verse 1. And the Lord also spake unto Joshua, saying, speak to the children of Israel, saying, appoint out for you cities of refuge, whereof I spake unto you by the hand of Moses. So we're going to have 6 cities in this land that Joshua has divided among the 12 tribes. They're going to pick out 6 cities, and they're going to be separated, and they're there for a special purpose. In verse 3, we get the purpose. that the slayer that killeth any person unawares and unwittingly may flee thither. Now this could be accidental killing. If you'll notice how it's done. The slayer that killeth any person unawares and unwittingly may flee thither, and they shall be your refuge from the avenger of blood. So if you accidentally kill somebody, or not premeditated murder, then you can flee to one of these 6 cities called the cities of refuge. Verse 4, and when he that doth flee unto one of those cities shall stand at the entering of the gate of the city, and shall declare his cause in the ears of the elders of that city, meaning to say, if someone had accidentally murdered a person or accidentally killed them, then he would flee to one of these 6 cities. And then when he got to the gate of that city, these are fenced cities. They have a wall around them, a gate, a wall and a gate. And there are people on guard at the gate to see who goes out and who comes in. And that's why it says in verse 4, and when he that doth flee unto one of those cities shall stand at the entering of the gate of the city, and shall declare his cause in the ears of the elders of that city, they shall take him into the city unto them, and give him a place that he may dwell among them. So Joshua, under the leadership of God Almighty, established 6 cities to protect people who got into trouble. Because people are going to get into trouble. Notice what it says in verse 5. And if the avenger of blood pursue after him, then they shall not deliver the slayer up into his hand. In other words, if some of the kinfolks of this person is slain, if they go after this fella to try to catch him, to try to kill him, because before Joshua ever appeared on the scene, there was the law of an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, etc., which is in operation in the Muslim countries today. That's why they have public executions and things of that nature. And you read about them not too many years ago. A young lady in the Muslim religion had married a fellow that she wasn't supposed to marry, and they took them into a public square in front of 10,000 people, and they beheaded them, shot her and beheaded the fellow. They get even over there, and that's one of the reasons that they have all the problems right now up in the country of Lebanon and Syria, places like that, because they like to get even with the other fella. And this is the law of the land over there, get even, revenge. So, verse 5, if the avenger of blood pursue after him, that is, chase after him, then they shall not deliver the slayer up into his hand, because he smote his neighbor unwittingly, accidentally. Didn't plan it, just developed, and no real apparent cause, and hated him not before time. No premeditated murder. Just something happened, and it wasn't planned, it just happened. So this fella has to be protected. Verse 6, and he shall dwell in that city, that is, the fellow who's guilty, he shall dwell in that city until he stand before the congregation for judgment. Because in these fenced cities of refuge, they have a court. And the congregation come together, and they listen to the evidence, and then they're going to decide, is he guilty? Is he not guilty? But temporarily, until the trial, he is protected as long as he stays in the city. Notice what it says. He shall dwell in that city, verse 6, until he stand before the congregation for judgment, and until the death of the high priest that shall be in those days. Then shall the slayer return and come into his or unto his own city. So once, if the high priest dies, or if the congregation deems him not guilty, then he can go back to his home, wherever he lived. But that doesn't really release the pressure, because these people who had a loved one killed may still carry animosity in their hearts, and you run the risk of getting murdered again are getting murdered by those people. It's sort of a Hatfield and McCoy situation like they had down in West Virginia. For years, they fought down there for 4, 5 generations. And still the blood is hot in that part of the country among those people. Not all of them, but some of them. This is the middle of verse 6, then shall the slayer return and come unto his own city, and unto his own house, unto the city from whence he fled. So he goes back home. Verse 7, and these are the cities. And they appointed Kedesh in Galilee. That's up in the northern part of the state of Israel. Kedesh in Galilee, and Mount Naphtali. That's way up here right near the tribe of Dan. Kedesh, way up in the top of the country. And Shechem in Mount Ephraim. So you look where the tribe of Ephraim would be, and that's down here in the middle of the country, Ephraim. There's one up in Naphtali. There's one down in Ephraim, and Kirjath Arba, which is Hebron. And Hebron is just 20 miles approximately south of Jerusalem, which is Hebron in the mountain of Judah, verse 8, and on the other side of Jordan, so over on the east bank of Jordan. So here on the west bank you have 3 cities, one at the top, one in the middle, and one in the southern part. Now he's going to have 3 cities over on the east bank of the Jordan. That's verse 8. And on the other side, Jordan, by Jericho, eastward, they assign Bezer in the wilderness upon the plain out of the tribe of Reuben, and Ramoth and Gilead out of the tribe of Gad, and Golan and Bashan out of the tribe of Manasseh. These were the cities appointed for all the children of Israel, all of the 12 tribes. Approximately 2 million. We don't really know exactly how many, but this is an approximate figure. Approximately 2 million people, and among 2 million people, you're going to have problems. You're going to have people that get mad, people that threaten to kill, people that get involved in dope, people get involved in alcohol, people that get grudges against each other. So you're going to have killing. So Joshua, the smart man that he was, he foresaw all of this. And so under the leadership of God's instructions, he designated these 6 cities. 3 on one side of the Jordan, 3 on the other side of the Jordan. Verse 9 says, these were the cities appointed for all the children of Israel, and for the stranger that sojourneth among them, that whosoever killeth any person at unawares might flee thither, and not die by the hand of the avenger of blood, until he stood before the congregation. So, as I said previously, there had to be a trial. The congregation had to be brought into the matter so that there could be a trial. Now, if found not guilty, if this man who had committed murder, if found not guilty of willful murder, he was supposed to remain in the confines of the city of refuge. If the congregation, the court, tried him and they found him not guilty, then he remained in the confines of the city of refuge after the trial until the death of the high priest. Now, just why he had to stay there until the death of the high priest, I'm not positive, I'm not sure about that. After that, after the high priest dies, after that, he could go home and resume his former life. If he left the city of refuge any time before this, the avenger of blood could kill him without punishment. So they had terrific laws, and that goes back to the book of Numbers 35, verses 1 through 34. See, they had strict laws and they enforced them. So once he had his trial and they found him not guilty, then he lived in the city of refuge until the high priest died. Once the high priest died, then he could go back to his home, and if the avenger tried to attack him, then the avenger was guilty, and he stood the risk of being slaughtered or murdered. Quite interesting. Quite interesting indeed. So there we have the 6 cities of refuge according to Numbers 35, verse 9. It might be interesting if we went to the book of Numbers 35 for just a moment. I think we might find something interesting there. The book of Numbers, chapter 35. And this comes from the days of Moses. Therefore, it's rather interesting. 35, beginning in verse 1. And there it says, "And the Lord spake unto Moses in the plains of Moab by the Jordan near Jericho. And he said, Command the children of Israel that they give unto the Levites of the inheritance of their possession cities to dwell in, and ye shall give also unto the Levites suburbs for the cities round about them. And the cities shall they have to dwell in, and the suburbs of them shall be for their cattle, and for their goods, and for all their beasts." Let's go down to verse 6. "And among the cities which ye shall give unto the Levites, there shall be 6 cities for refuge, which ye shall appoint for the manslayer, that he may flee thither, and to them ye shall add 42 cities. So all the cities which ye shall give to the Levites shall be 48 cities. Them shall you give with their suburbs. And the cities which ye shall give shall be of the possession of the children of Israel. From them that have many ye shall give many, but from them that have few ye shall give few. Every one shall give of his cities unto the Levites according to his inheritance which he inheriteth." So that was back under the law of Moses. Now in the 20th chapter, we find Joshua carrying out what his former commander had instructed him to do. So there we have the 6 cities of refuge. Now we move to chapter 21, and we have 8 verses there. And in verses 1 through 8, we have the Levites' inheritance. This is quite interesting. And we're going to again listen to the voice of Mr. Scorby as he reads these 8 verses for us. Levi's inheritance, a request to the Levites.
Then came near the heads of the fathers of the Levites unto Eleazar the priest, and unto Joshua the son of Nun, and unto the heads of the fathers of the tribes of the children of Israel. And they spake unto them at Shiloh in the land of Canaan, saying, The Lord commanded by the hand of Moses to give us cities to dwell in with the suburbs thereof for our cattle. And the children of Israel gave unto the Levites out of their inheritance at the commandment of the Lord these cities and their suburbs. And the lot came out for the families of the Kohathites. And the children of Aaron the priest, which were of the Levites, had by lot out of the tribe of Judah, and out of the tribe of Simeon, and out of the tribe of Benjamin, 13 cities. And the rest of the children of Kohath had by lot out of the families of the tribe of Ephraim, and out of the tribe of Dan, and out of the half-tribe of Manasseh, 10 cities. And the children of Gershon had by lot out of the families of the tribe of Issachar, and out of the tribe of Asher, and out of the tribe of Naphtali, and out of the half-tribe of Manasseh in Bashan, 13 cities. The children of Merari by their families had out of the tribe of Reuben, and out of the tribe of Gad, and out of the tribe of Zebulun, 12 cities. And the children of Israel gave by lot unto the Levites these cities with their suburbs, as the Lord commanded by the hand of Moses.
So there we have the Levites' inheritance. The Levites were the priests, and you remember they did not get any land. When you look at the map of the 12 tribes, you don't find any of the land that's given to the Levites. So there's a special inheritance. The different peoples in the different 12 plots of ground, the 12 areas occupied by the tribes, they gave each some of them to the tribes of Levi. And this accommodated them because the Levites had they had cattle, they had families, so they had a need for land, and so God provided for them. I like the last verse in chapter 19, and the last sentence in that verse. It says, So they made an end to dividing the country. quite interesting. When you read verse 21, it says, "Then came near the heads of the fathers of the Levites." Then, that is, when all Israel had received their inheritance, including Joshua, who was the last to receive. It was for the Levites to inquire about their cities and suburbs, which Moses promised them among all the tribes of Israel, according to Numbers 35, verses 1 through 4. Theirs was not a separate portion of the land, as in the case of the other tribes, and it was not called an inheritance because of this. The Lord was called their inheritance, and with all the tithing and dedicated things, they really didn't need all of the land like the other tribes got. So it's rather interesting when you stop to realize how God back there long years ago provided for His people. And as I've said a number of times teaching the book of Joshua, all of this land that we have shown on the map was land that was occupied by the tribe or by the Canaanites, wild nomadic pagan tribes who enjoyed the fertility of this land and the beauty of all of these water springs and rivers and lakes and the magnificent climate along the coast of the Mediterranean. They enjoyed it for years and years, and finally God came to the place where God told Abraham, even before He called him out of the Ur of the Chaldees, He said, "I'm going to give you a land that you've never seen, and this is going to be your inheritance." And then He used Joshua to drive those wild nomadic tribes out of the land so that He could give the land of Canaan to the 12 tribes of Israel, who sprang from the 12 sons of Jacob from 4 wives, and that's how it all began. It's marvelous when you stop to realize that this whole Middle East situation started with one man and 2 women. One man and 2 women. Abram, his wife Sarah, or Sarai, and then Hagar, the Egyptian handmaid of Sarah's. Each had a child, and from those 2 boys have come the settlements in that part of the world from the loins of 2 men. Ishmael from Hagar, the Egyptian, and Isaac from Sarah, the child born of the free woman, and from those 2 men, Ishmael, and from Isaac have come the whole population of that Middle East. And what are they doing? They're fighting over this same land. Same land is being fought over. And it's as unsettled today as it's ever been. Just as completely unsettled today as it's ever been. As I made a statement in a recent Bible class, this land is never going to be consolidated and settled until the Son of God, the Lord Jesus Christ, comes back from heaven in a literal body to take over the controls of this earth. And only then will it be solved. And you can bring all of the premiers of the various Mideast countries together, and you can send over new representatives from the White House, or representatives from Canada, or from England, from the other countries, all to go to the United Nations. You'll never have it solved until it's resolved once and finally by Jesus Christ, when He returns to the earth to reign on this planet for a millennium of years.
Dr. Howard C. Estep has presented 2 more Bible study lectures from the book of Joshua, covering chapter 19 through chapter 21, verse 8. The next lesson in the Joshua Bible Study series will be heard on cassette number 9.